All right, so this is a Strathmore 500 Bristol. I use the kid finish or the vellum finish as opposed to smooth. I like the toothy quality to it. And I'm going to just do a quick pencil sketch here. So I'm going to start out with a pen nib and show you how those work, and then we'll switch to a brush. So I turn my paper a little bit because this line, I want it to go away from me. One of the problems with using a pen nib is that it really does put a lot of ink down on the paper, and it takes a long time for it to dry.
Do you always work from one side to the other so you don't smear?
Yeah, I'll start on one side and work my way down this way, but there'll come a point where the drawing is too wet for me to continue working on it, so I have to put it aside and let it dry. I mean, it doesn't take forever. It takes maybe a few minutes for it to dry, but you really put a lot of ink on the paper with pen nibs. It just comes pouring out.
Is that a Hunt 102 you're drawing with?
This is a Hunt 102.
Do you think crow quill and nibs are, I imagine they're being used less and less and less.
Yeah. Yeah, digital inking is, something that's sort of taken over. I've tried it and I just don't like the results, but that's just me. I see a lot of people that do some really amazing stuff digitally. So it's just what you're able to make work for you.
What about the dog?
Draw the little Yorkie over here, or whatever it was. It's Irish or Scottish Terrier, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Scottish Terrier.
It's black.
So I'm getting in trouble now because I can't go over this area.
Oh, because it's still wet?
Yeah.
Is that ink jarred?
Or fuller when you decide to bring a brush in?
If I'm going to do big, bold lines, that's when I use a brush. Let's switch to the brush here. You really have to be careful when you're using a brush to really be focused. But it is by far the most versatile inking tool. The other thing about brushes that are great is, with pen nibs, I can do a few lines and I got to dip it again. Dip, 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 dip all day long. Brushes you can load with ink, and that you can ink for like a minute. And you want to be careful how far you dip your brush. You only want to dip it about halfway through the bristles. The ink will kind of go up into the bristle areas, but it won't go all the way up into the barrel where the glue is, which is good because the varnish in your ink will start to break down the glue, and your bristles will start to get kind of fuzzy. I use a brush a lot for hair. Hair is great when you're using brush. He doesn't have much hair, but if somebody's got long flowing locks of hair, brushes are great for that because you can do like long, strokes of lines and get big, long, flowing hair sort of things.
What's the dry time on that ink? Is it just
instant?
a couple minutes?
Oh, wow. That's the best part about brush. You don't put as much ink down as you do with pens. Pen nibs, the inks, man, are just thick and gooey, and they just sit there. They like puddle on and you can actually feel the thickness of them sometimes if you have a real thick line. Whereas with brushes, you're laying it down right on the surface, and it's just a very thin layer of ink. And of course, ink is, you use a brush when you want to do big areas of black.
So once the brush is flowing, I noticed you didn't dip it down as long. Is that because it's
already loaded?
It's got its.
Yeah, it just see how it gets a little dry brush after a while. Then I'll just dip it and get a little bit more ink. You don't have to load it up like that every time. Once the ink gets in there. I'm using a lot of ink right now because I'm laying down all this how it's black, but I'll tell you what blew my mind was when I found out how Davis inks with the brush. And I was out to lunch with a couple of the old school Mad guys in New York, and Nick Meglin was one of them, and he was a editor for Mad for 40 years, and was around back in the beginning. And he said, we were talking about inking, and he said, do you want me to show you how Jack Davis inked with the brush? I'm like, yeah. And he picked up a pen, and he said, this is how he did it. He held his brush like this. Do a little bit of shading. So I could go crazy, with cross hatching and everything here, but I want to move
When
on.
do you draw the line on those cross hatches and stuff? Like, when's it? How are you always chasing that, and when to not chase that?
Yeah, well, for me, I always should have stopped 10 minutes ago. Yeah. Now we'll stop.
All right.
So any questions about inking?